So after Nikola Tesla, I would say the next major step came from Galen Hieronymus. And here's a picture of Galen. And he developed what's called the Hieronymus device, this picture here. And that was using a totally different type of energy that was, he did not use scalar electromagnetics as we know it. That was the next step. But what he was doing is using a prism and splitting the light wave so that light can behave as either a wave or a particle. And those two aspects are within the photonic marriage of particle wave. They're bound together. But in physics, this gets really deep, but in physics, you can either measure the photon as a wave or as a particle, but not both at the same time. So what he did was he took it and he split it so that he would only take the wave portion of the photon and then use that wavelength, that wave photon, to be interacting with electrons. And so he would amplify that wave function. And he called it a different type of energy. He called it eloptic energy, from electronic or electric and optical. It's kind of somewhere in between. And quantum physics and physics are now catching up with this concept that there is this other type of energy that's not really electric and it's not optical. Photons behave very strangely. And he figured out how to use that to his advantage and created a radionics instrument that could both measure, analyze, and these energy waves at a distance, and then correct them or change those energetic frequencies at a distance. And here's a little schematic of how he did that, of taking the light waves and breaking them up and then amplifying those through electronic means. Very, very interesting and absolutely genius concept. Now, one of the experiments that he did is that he took the vital signs of one of the astronauts in the Apollo, one of the Apollo missions, and I think it was Apollo 11, if I remember correctly, and he measured their vital signs every hour all the way from the Earth to the Moon. And then that was a lot of entries. It was 500 pages of entries. And he sent it to NASA and had them check it against everything that they were doing on the spacecraft of measuring the vital signs, heart rate, breathing rate, things like that. And it matched hour by hour everything that they had measured on the spacecraft. So we know that this is not only a different type of energy, but it's very usable in the three-dimensional sense. Now, the next step beyond that was Dr. Willard Frank, or Bill Lawson. His name was William Francis Lawson was his full name, but he went by Dr. Willard Frank. And I worked together with him for over 20 years. I think it was almost 25 years before he passed away. And he was a good friend of Galen Hieronymus's. And they spent a lot of time discussing this and working out the bugs on this. But we figured out, what Bill figured out was that this scalar electromagnetic energy, when you collapse the electromagnetic spectrum, was that same energy that was this eloptic energy. So we could produce, without having to tune with a prism, that was very highly fine-tuned things to be able to bend the light exactly the right amount and have another tuner with a copper rod pick up this waveform and not the particle form of the photons. It was a very delicate instrument, and it had to be tuned exactly right. And so what Bill came up with was a way to use scalar electromagnetics to collapse the electromagnetic field and make a very stable instrument that anyone could use. And that was, well, here's a picture of the digitron. This was the first digital, what we would call the first digital scalar electromagnetic radionic unit. He had several units before that, the Vitatron and the Neutratron. This was called the digitron, and it was the first digital unit with memory in it. And then later, he developed the SE5 and then later the SE5 Plus which is the ones that I worked with for over 25 years with him. And then once he passed away, his widow turned all the work over to me, and I went further on to develop here the SC5 1000. So practically, what does a scalar informational waveform do is gives you the ability, once you have the right tuning equipment, to be able to get information from a distance and also send information to a distance. In the case of, let's say, chakra balancing. So you're sitting in Bali right now, I'm sitting in Germany, and if I take a sample of your hair or some resonating sample, which is a whole other subject, but we could actually use a photograph of you if it's the right kind of photograph, and we could set up a resonating field and a standing wave, longitudinal standing wave between you and I, then I could actually measure each one of your chakras, and if I found one of those chakras to be out of balance, I could then send back corrective frequencies that would then begin the balancing cycle, and your body would actually react to these new information and start balancing that chakra.